Welcome, Alex and Edward. I will start with Alex's bio. Alex Ogario is head of the private office at Knight Frank Finance. He's based in London for the past 7+ years. He provides advice to ultra high net worth individuals and their families globally, for everything from real estate, private, yachts, private aircraft, art, and classic cars. So everything luxury, basically. Edward de Mallet Morgan is a partner at Knight Frank within the international high net worth team, super prime team. He deals with properties, advising people on properties throughout Europe, Monaco, Bahamas, private islands, and placing high net worth in the United States. Welcome, both of you.
Welcome.
Thanks, Justin.
Thanks for coming. So to start out with the obvious question, how has Europe weathered the COVID storm in terms of the markets?
Do you want to start, Edward, or shall I?
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, wow. It's like saying what's going on in all of America. It's do you know what? It's different. I mean, I'll just focus on the markets that I look after, which is basically sort of the top end of a lot of those key high value markets in Europe. And it's a bit of a different scene depending on where you are. If we are really looking at the very top end of that sort of ultra high net worth market, that sort of 20-30 million euro plus bracket, historically, it's very much dependent on a lot of people from the UAE, a lot of people from Russia and the CIS, and particularly from Asia as well. And what we are finding at the moment, which is, I'm sure, exactly what you're finding in the US, and I can add the US buyers as well to that list, is that for people who are on the ground at the moment and who have stayed in Europe, who have stayed at their various homes, whether in the mountains, whether that's been in Gstaad, or whether that's been in the French Alps, or whether they've stayed in the south of France or in Monaco or wherever else, or indeed in London, then those clients have still been out viewing. But otherwise, the top end of those main markets through Europe have been, in terms of sales activity, it's been dominated by people who can get in a car and drive to the different locations. We had a guy viewing a house last week who'd driven from Oslo to the south of France. So it's very much dominated by clients from the top end of the market, but it's a funny moment for everybody at the moment, obviously with what's going on with the pandemic. And then a lot of people have kind of forgotten about Brexit, which still hasn't been resolved. Which is something that, Alex, when he talks about some of the finance elements of real estate and other luxury asset classes, it's something that you've got to really plan for the future. But, a lot of our clients, they don't need to sell, just like you, Justin, for your clients at the top end of the market. They would like to sell. They're motivated purely from the perspective of it suits their lifestyle today to sell, but they don't need that money today, tomorrow, in a week's time, and they're quite happy to wait for it. So we're finding that there are a number of big properties. We're talking sort of 100, 200 million euro plus properties that have not come to the market that would have done otherwise this summer, whether that's been in the south of France, whether that's been in Switzerland, whether that's been in Paris. People are just saying, well, hang on a minute, do I bring my property to the market if that top end buyer is restricted from traveling at the moment? And one of the things which we mentioned earlier, Justin and Alex, we talked about was, I've got an interesting situation at the moment. We're all using a lot more videos in the properties, and Europe is very much behind the US in terms of how much we really focus and use social media, but also how much we have historically used videos for marketing. And we've got a client at the moment, an American client, who is not able to travel. So I'm arranging for his lawyer and their retained agent from the US who has been in Europe. They're traveling from the UK. Well, we're supposed to be traveling from the UK as of this morning to go to the south of France to visit a property that this client likes. And he's given his lawyer full power of attorney to purchase the property if she likes it, and if the agent likes it, on the basis that he's only seen it on video, but is not happy to get on an airplane and travel at the moment. But it suits his lifestyle.
What do you think is driving that urgency? Because you said that he can't travel anyway for the foreseeable future right now.
Yeah, I think that for that super rich clientele, what is happening in the world at the moment, yes, it's slightly clipping people's wings in terms of their ability to travel. But I don't think it's changed the way that people want to live. And we all hope that there's, going to be, the pandemic is going to be over. There's going to be an antivirus, which we're all going to be able to use. And that whether it's in a year's time or whatever, we can get back to normal. And this guy owns a house in Sardinia. He owns other houses through Europe. He's got multiple homes through the US. He's got a big house in London. He's got at least one super yacht that I'm aware of. So those guys, that travel for a lot of my clients, for super rich clients who have traveled privately before. And even if they weren't traveling privately before, a lot more of them are traveling privately now. I was talking to give another example, I was talking to the guys in Ibiza, which is probably where you would rather be this summer at the moment, Justin.
Yeah. Sure.
But they're saying they're two big signs and indicators of what's going on in the market at the moment. They're not seeing the really big super yachts. So the really big, your 100-meter plus super yachts, which are usually being chartered by Russian oligarchs or other super rich people from CIS, or Americans, or people from the Middle East. They're not there. However, they've never seen so many private planes on the tarmac at the airport in Ibiza. So there are a lot of people are still wanting to travel, but I think at the moment what's going to happen is that people are going to travel to fewer destinations, but they will spend longer in those locations, which is definitely going to play into people's motivation for buying or not buying, because there are a lot of people who have chosen to rent, right? So if you live in the Far East, why would you want to own something that you're only going to use for maybe a week of the year, right? Unless it's a super rare trophy asset that you want as part of your portfolio. But if you're all of a sudden, so if you're in the US, let's say, and you're saying, well, actually, look, I quite like to be away from here. I'm living in a city. What about the Caribbean, right? So you mentioned islands. So I'm happy to be selling an island in the Caribbean called Little Pipe Key. It's in the Exumas. It's probably the most beautiful bit of real estate I've ever been involved in the last sort of 18, 20 or so years. But it is pristine real estate. You've got your own private island. And I've had a number of clients, probably got 6 more, should I say it this way, interest in private islands has probably increased for me 5 or 6 fold since March.
I mean, if you want your own space, I mean, what a better place, right?
Exactly. And no, it's changed a lot of things. I think it's going to change how people rent. I think people are going to rent properties for longer. For those people who are dependent on rental income to own properties, like for people who inherit properties from their parents or from their grandparents who are dependent on the rental properties to pay for them and look after them and pay for their holidays, if they're being squeezed on the rental income, it may bring some properties to the market because they may not necessarily always be able to afford it. But, we had a client who went out to an island in the Caribbean in March for 2 weeks on the basis of a holiday, never intended on buying. Everything started happening in terms of lockdowns around the world. He rang me and said, Edward, look, we didn't fly here intending to buy. Actually, we figure why not? We love it here. I've been able to work. I get up at 4 a.m. 4 a.m. Caribbean time to work across the European markets. My wife gets up and works as well. My kids are remote working, and technology has definitely afforded us. The ability to work more remotely. For those of you that are tuning in, we've had a bit of a technological issue, as I think a lot of us know and understand in terms of being able to post this video live. I think Justin was probably going to say it if I wasn't, but we are recording this. We are going to post this out for you guys to be able to watch later.
So what you were saying is interesting too, because I think that this, before this, it was all about the shared economy, shared co-working spaces, Airbnb, sharing a house. And I think the market's really, contracted. And I think it's a whole shift away from that now. It's more my own space. I want a bigger space just for myself. I want a home gym. I want an office to myself. I don't want to go to a shared gym. It's really interesting. What you said about the yachts is interesting, though. I would think, to me, it would seem like this is a great time to charter a yacht. You're on your own. You can travel around on a luxury yacht. Why do you think that less yachts and more planes in Ibiza?
No, I think it's been about the kind of a lot of the people who would historically have chartered those big boats are in the Middle East, and they're in Russia and the CIS and those parts of the world where their lockdown restrictions have been much more severe. So they actually haven't been able to get to those boats in order to charter them. But the charter companies actually have, as far as I know from my friends who are in the business, they've recovered a little bit, and people are chartering boats for longer, which is like what they're doing with the properties. You can get on a boat where the staff have all been literally haven't left the boat. The crew haven't left the boat for a couple of months. So that from that perspective, they're all okay. The food and all the materials and any merchandise is all sanitized before coming on the boat. So people are still doing that and are renting for longer periods. But it's, I think that people are smart, right? And the finance element plays into it a lot. The currency element plays into a lot. So we have an amazing publication called The Wealth Report, which arguably is one of the leading publications in terms of trends for investments of the super rich globally. A lot of our there's a huge amount of our clients that are looking at investing in real estate through the coming year and are looking at buying multiple homes overseas. Currency plays a lot into this at the same time, as well as financing. Actually, Alex may be able to add something.
Yeah, Alex. So are they cash purchases, or are a lot of people financing? And not just for real estate, is it the same for, if they're buying a private jet or art? So I know that even in the art market, there's several banks now that have emerged that are doing art financing for art purchases.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just going back to the pandemic and how it's affected financial markets, I mean, no doubt there's been an impact. And, at the beginning of the pandemic starting, the onset of it, what we saw is a lot of liquidity pressure. A lot of banks' balance sheets were under strain. We saw a lot of corporates that were essentially looking to strengthen their balance sheets because they were worried about the future. And so banks' ability to then lend money to new people was constrained. I think what we've seen is that over the last few months, as banks have, corporates have less demand on a bank's balance sheet, actually that pressure has eased and it's now become less of a liquidity issue. I think where we're sort of facing more issues is around underwriting. So banks are increasingly analyzing and doing due diligence on a customer or a client's balance sheet and their cash flows, just to sort of look at them and say, are these really COVID proof? Are these cash flows going to continue? Is your business affected adversely by COVID-19? And that's where it's more difficult. But I think for the type of clients that Edward and I and yourself, Justin, deal with, generally speaking, they do have strong balance sheets. They do have strong businesses. No doubt, they're having some issues, like everyone, during this period. But banks are willing to support those people. And there's definitely certain institutions that have strong balance sheets and are still able to deploy capital into the market. So from that point of view, we're still able to offer lending solutions for our clients. In terms of what clients are actually doing at the moment, people are still looking to borrow money. I think the fundamentals around borrowing money are the same. I mean, people are looking to increase their returns, so sort of leverage returns. People are looking for the tax benefits. So in markets around the world, in the UK, for example, there's inheritance tax benefits often to buying with a mortgage. In markets like France and Spain, there's some wealth tax considerations with mortgaging. So there's always tax reasons why people are looking to do it. And then on top of that, as you'll be well aware, interest rates globally are so low at the moment. So low. Again, with the stimulus packages that central banks are putting across, you've got monetary easing, you've got super low interest rates, and it just means that borrowing money is cheaper than ever. Yeah. And it's so attractive for people to borrow, whether it's property, whether it's art, you mentioned, whether it's a yacht. I mean, it's just a great time to do it. And why would you use your capital, all of your capital, when you can borrow the money and do it at a cheap rate? And then it's about finding an arbitrage where actually you can put that money somewhere else and you can earn a return somewhere else. And if we look at stock markets, especially in the US, you look at the NASDAQ, you wouldn't know there's a pandemic going on at the moment, because it's just accelerating beyond belief.
Yeah, it is interesting right now, because I think real estate, I think the people who are buying in the expensive markets like San Francisco, it's surprisingly really, really strong. And I think, like you said, those people still have a lot of money. There are still banks happy to lend to them. And I think it can, across luxury sectors in general. I mean, obviously retail is suffering, but inventory is constrained, whether it's in the car market, factories, manufacturing, and people are stuck at home. And I don't want to say they're bored, but they're definitely spending money on luxury items like cars and art and houses.
If you look at Ferrari, for example, Ferrari are reporting huge numbers.
Totally.
And you would have thought that maybe people would be holding off on luxury purchases, but actually it doesn't seem to be happening. And also, what we're seeing and what we've seen historically, when you've got a crisis or a pandemic, people have a flight to safety and a flight to quality. So, things like luxury real estate and quality assets, people want those because they can buy into and believe in the long-term value of those things.
I think also, you're spending so much time at home with your things. People want a nicer place, nicer space to work in. Yeah. So, I think the same thing, the Porsche dealership here, I thought, oh, maybe it's a great time to buy one. Like, the used car prices have gone up and you can't even get a new one. Partly because
I was just talking to,
yeah.
No, I was just saying, I was talking to an agent this morning about a client who's just bought the new Bugatti. Yeah. And those new Bugattis are they're like 17, 18 million. So, in terms of investing in those luxury assets, whether it is, there have been some of the most historically high art sales over the last number of years. And as classic cars, vintage car sales, we had a rare whiskey index in our last wealth report. You're quite right. People want to invest. And I think that when you get times like this, it's about investing in quality and rarity, and looking for things that are going to be unique in those different markets. And you're part of the world. If you talk about the tech money that is out there, right? Through this time, we're all online. Like, maybe we wouldn't be doing this Facebook Live video together if we were in February earlier on this year, right? So we're all online. We're all using technology more than ever. We all realize that technology can afford most of us who are office-based to do a lot of our jobs as we would have done otherwise. And, I'm seeing, clients who have made money who are in tech businesses from all around the world who are still looking at investing and still looking at buying real estate because, they're saying, well, actually, if I'm going to hang on to this, and like I say, with all my clients, if you're gonna buy something like, one of these rare, very expensive properties in these locations, this always needs to be looked at on the basis of a long-term purchase. This should be at least a 5-year, if not a 10-year plus hold. Otherwise, you have to think about, the liquidity of it, and whether or not, if you bought it for a exceptionally high price tomorrow, and then, there's a global recession or we have another pandemic or something else happens, and you then want to sell it, will you be able to? So, people need to just be careful and analyze what they're buying and make sure, obviously, they're buying it for the right price. But if you're buying something that's truly unique, whether it's in San Fran, whether it's in New York, whether it's in London or in Paris or in Monaco, at least long term, that the real estate tends to hold its value and tends to come back, albeit that for main markets around the world, markets have gone sideways, prices have fallen, prices have come back up again. London saw, a huge deal in London relatively recently. So there is still definitely appetite there for the top end of the market. Funnily enough, it may be that middle wealth, maybe between 5 and 15 million, where I think where volumes have fallen a little bit or may see slightly less deals. There's a there's a different dynamic of the kind of people at sort of sub $5 million or £5 million than there is at sort of 30, 40 million plus. But yeah.
I love how you have there's a rare whiskey index. I used to get Pappy Van Winkle, 23-year-old in the city. There was Amethyst Liquors right there. And this is before whiskey was a hot thing in London. This is several years ago. They were all into scotch, and so I would get it there for like, I don't know, I think it was 300 a bottle, but it was going for like 1,500 in the United States. But now it's caught on.
Yeah.
In terms of
it's well, and a lot of people investing in Japanese whiskeys.
Totally. In terms of like, if you're a foreigner and you want to invest in Europe, like I heard if you want to buy in France, for example, that there's some amazing like financing options. I could be wrong. Or are there certain spots in Europe where you can pretty much get a loan at a very, very, very low interest rate to buy a place?
Yeah,
now since the shelter in place, I've heard like people have been flocking to Tuscany to try to get deals. And what's the best market for that if you're a foreign, in terms of a deal, if you're financing?
Yeah, I think there's different sides to it. I think Edward could obviously speak with great clarity about the markets that you should be investing in Europe from a property point of view. From a financing perspective, we look at markets like France. It's quite a liquid market. There's definitely some tax benefits to taking debt, as I said earlier, in France. So a lot of people look at taking debt in France. Across all of the Eurozone, you've got a negative central bank rate. So it just means that the cost of debt in Europe, generally speaking, is very cheap. And if you look at markets in Scandinavia, which aren't necessarily markets that foreign investors really get involved in that often, although they've got some mortgage products that are actually paying people a return for having them. So effectively, you've got a negative mortgage rate and the bank is paying you to have the mortgage. So that isn't a great model, I think, and that's not how it should necessarily work. But in France, you can get some great finance rates, and you've got interest rates which are very close to 1% on mortgages. Obviously in the US now, because of the Fed rate reductions and the situation we're in at the moment, I think I saw the other day the 30-year fixed rate in the US has come down to a record low or a very low level. So I think across the world now we're seeing extremely cheap financing. But yeah, Europe, France is a particularly good market. If you're looking to borrow money, it's quite a liquid market. There's a lot of lending options. There's a lot of banks that will be willing to lend to foreigners or non-residents. The UK is probably, I'd say, the preeminent and the easiest market for non-residents to borrow in, because there's been such an international base here for a long time that banks are well set up to lend to US persons or people from different places around the world. Italy is very attractive and seems to be very interesting to US nationals, and we get a lot of US clients that are looking to buy in Italy. It's a more challenging market when it comes to financing, purely because there's not that many lending options available, not just to US persons, but to people who are not Italian. It is possible. There are a few banks that can do it, but there's some caveats. So banks want you to develop a wider relationship with them. They want things like assets under management, which is a term that I'm not sure if you're familiar with, but essentially they want you to invest with them as well as taking a mortgage. It's kind of quid pro quo. They don't just want to give you the debt and you sort of ride off into the sunshine. They want you to do something else with them. And also there's requirements around the minimum loan amount. So you've got to borrow a certain amount for it to be interesting to the bank. But it is possible. It's just a little bit more difficult. Other markets.
But Alex, sorry, Alex. I was just going to say that you find with where there is a restriction for somebody who is overseas buying in a particular market, a lot of them will refinance on other assets, whether at home or in other countries, right? So whether it is against a yacht or against art or against their house in their apartment in Manhattan, there are lots of different ways. And we had Alex and I dealt with a client recently who's refinanced on something in Europe in order to buy something else elsewhere. So it's kind of, there's a lot of flexibility, isn't there, particularly with the private banks.
And I think that's where our business is really well set up, because we can look at someone's balance sheet, we can look at the debt, we can look at the assets they've got, and these clients usually have things all over the world. And what we can try and do is be quite creative about how we're sort of using their balance sheet to try and leverage it and let them do the things they want to do, whether it's buying a property in the Caribbean, whether it's buying a property in LA, in San Francisco, in New York, wherever it is. We can usually find a way of being creative to do that. So yeah, as Edward says, it's about looking at different things and trying to create a solution.
And how, with the lifestyle change now, have cities in Europe decreased, would you say, in demand? And what are the emerging markets that, all of a sudden have become hotter that were kind of waning before?
I mean,
And
Alex mentioned.
Yeah, obviously in the UK, you had Brexit before, which was definitely having an effect. I also wonder, like, what has happened since then?
There's been a lot of global reinvestment back into the UK. I think there was a sense, certainly a sense from the US that the UK looked like it was good value. If you look at the interest rate change, Alex will probably be able to say what that was from 5 or 6 years ago to what it is today. And then you look at the sort of the purchasing costs in the UK and elsewhere. All of a sudden, it starts to look interesting to buy for what the dollar gets against sterling. London and New York kind of trade places. They always do as the sort of two top global cities, and they will always attract investment for all around the world. But you think that nobody wants to live in the cities at all, but I think it's nonsense, really. I think a lot of people are looking for a bit more space. I've got clients in Monaco who are saying, well, actually, we've got a 2-bed apartment because it's all we need. But actually, if we have another lockdown, we want a 4-bed apartment, and we want some sort of terrace or balcony. If we're in our apartment again. And I think that's been the same, whether it's again, I'm sure you found it at home in and around San Fran. People want a bit more space. They want, slightly bigger houses, maybe more outside space. But I think for those that rush and think that this is the time to desert the cities, I think that's very short-sighted.
Yeah, I agree.
I think businesses will go back. I mean, if you look at the commercial investment that's still there in the UK, in parts of Europe and in the US, it's not like all of a sudden everyone's trying to flog office space left, right, and centre. There's still a huge demand for investment of good asset classes. So Alex mentioned Italy, so the lakes, so in and around Lake Como, that market is seeing a huge amount of activity at the moment.
Sure.
And the south of France, where you get a lot of people who own apartments in Monaco, which is almost 95% an apartment type market, a little bit like places like Hong Kong and Singapore are. And people are saying, well, actually, now I do want my weekend house. I do, it's a little bit like the guys in Manhattan who want their houses in the Hamptons. Or in upstate New York. It's the same thing. People just want to have the provision to have a bit more space if they need it. But as I say to all my clients, if you don't need to sell your real estate, don't hang on to it.
Yeah, I think the same thing is happening here. It's not that people I actually don't see a big migration out. What I see is a lot of people want to either upgrade their place, so they're selling their condo into a single family home. So the condo market in San Francisco is actually a little bit weaker. Or they want a second, third. I mean, I have one client and they're looking for 2 second home. I mean, 2, like a third and fourth home. They already are I think it's more space. If they can afford it, they want other options. So I think that's absolutely true. And I think, listen, if you're starting a tech company, regardless, it's always going to be easier in San Francisco proper than it is in Montana. So, you're near the money, you're interacting with everyone, same everything. So, no, I think that's true. And I think people move to cities like London and New York also for the energy and the feel. And those same people don't necessarily want.
I think that the reasons why people live in cities are going to stay there. The fact you've got entertainment, you've got all the amenities, proximity to capital, proximity to work. I don't think those things change. But I think, as you say, people probably are looking for second homes. And there's probably people that were always going to move to more rural locations or more suburban locations. And maybe this just speeds that up. And maybe it accelerates that change. But I think for people who had a reason to be in a city, they'll probably want to stay in a city, but maybe look for a second home as a sort of addition to their property portfolio.
I mean, the commutable locations in and around London have seen a massive uptick in interest. There are various parts of places like the Cotswolds they're seeing a huge, sort of almost record number of deals, and very high value deals as well. And then, anywhere within about an hour and a half commuting,
Oxford, sure. Yeah.
there's, they're seeing a lot of interest, but it's retaining that city element. It's like for me, I effectively live in the suburbs of London, albeit usually, as you are, Justin, I'm on a plane every other week. But it's been quite nice to spend some time with the family. But I'm still in London, I'm still going and seeing clients, where, in central London, which actually has been rather nice, because there's been no traffic, or much less traffic than there used to be. But people still want to live, I think, ultimately, and where people are fortunate enough to have the means to be able to do so, even if it's a bit more expensive. I don't think that people's wants and ambitions are necessarily going to change. I just think, we're all adapting. We're all going to be different even after the, hopefully, God willing, the pandemic is resolved, and we get the antivirus and we all have it, etc. But I do think that this has been a positive change for all of us, for our, for our cultures and for our home lives and our family lives, right? And our health.
Yeah. I think I actually totally agree. I think the silver lining is it has changed human behavior permanently. And I think, I think there is going to be commercial space is going to look very different. I think people are still obviously going to have the headquarters in the office, but more people are going to be working from home. So I think the amount of space needed is going to decrease. And I think we're having more meaningful relationships with people. I think we're becoming more efficient in general, even work-wise. Yeah. I think, I started this real estate company, Avenue 8. I co-founded it, the partner, and we've been working on it for 2 years, but we were really designed for this type of environment. And I think all the agents who, before in the United States, at least, I know it's very different in Europe, but the ones here have said, oh, I need to, I love going to the office. I don't really go in often, but I like having it. Now they've adopted all the technologies that were already out there that they weren't using before. In the same way that the retail industry, I don't know how the shopping mall is ever going to come out of this. London's different. You have those amazing shopping malls that I love, but most of the ones here, I mean, people who were not shopping online before are definitely shopping online now, and they've realized it's efficient, it's more cost effective, and better variety. So I think it's accelerated a lot of change in human behavior. But I think a positive, certainly for you, is it has reinvigorated the secondary home market and I think the other markets that were out. We were becoming such an urbanized in general, cities were the place to be, and I think they still are. But I think, more rural communities are definitely picking up. If you look at Austin, Texas, Miami's picking up. I know it's somewhat urban. Portland, Oregon. So that's definitely the interesting thing. But so like in Europe,
places like Palm Beach.
Yeah, Palm Beach.
Places like Palm Beach, right? The markets have been super strong for a while.
Valley, yeah. So what is the market that you're seeing though that is the place, like a great buy right now in Europe, that you can still get a really affordable place? It's on the uptick. It's a great long-term investment at a reasonable price point.
Well, I think on the uptick is difficult. I don't think there are many markets anywhere in the world that are really going to see screaming prices rise. There will be prices that, of course, are going to rise in different parts of the world, but you can't bet on that. I don't think as an investment. You need to have other reasons for it, which are obviously driven by lifestyle, or driven by tax, or driven by finance, or driven by business or health, etc. There are a number of markets still where, if you have a good broker, there are deals out there. Yeah. In a lot of our markets, which is why I know that, Justin, you have the clients that you have, or I have the clients. I'm fortunate enough to have the clients that I have, and Alex the same. You need to be able to trust that the person that is advising you or representing you or searching on your behalf to buy something knows what they're talking about. But if you go to the south of France today, a lot of the stock that's on the market in the south of France has been on the market in some cases for 7 or 8 years. There are a lot of jaded sellers in those markets who do just want to sell. So there are definitely, and there are motivated deals out there. There are people who are getting divorced, so they're selling. There are people who may have businesses that have been affected by what's happening in the world at the moment, and who are a bit more motivated to take the cash and reinvest it in something else. Barbados is the most affordable it's been in a decade to buy into that market.
Interesting.
And that is, and that is a market that has historically performed very well. It's been, it has been, it's the local laws are pretty much based on British law. So and you can track that market for a long time. So we're seeing investment back into that market. And it's actually been reinvigorated a little bit, or Barbados has been in the press recently because they started up this welcome stamp. I don't know if you've heard about this, but basically it is encouraging people to, because we're working remotely, they're basically saying, look, why would you do it from San Francisco? Why would you do it from London? Why would you do it from Paris? Why don't you do it from the beach in Barbados? You can, they'll give you a visa for a year for $3,000. And as long as you are not doing business in Barbados and you're working on a business overseas, you can get a visa to stay in Barbados.
That's amazing.
And the Bahamas actually are about to launch. I think they're going to talk about it more next month, but a similar scheme, because they're saying, well, actually, if it doesn't need to be super rich people, they're even talking about university students, right? So if you're at college and you can't go to college, and you can study remotely, why wouldn't you want to do it in the tropics, right?
Yeah, that makes total sense. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
I think it's gonna, open up all these new markets like that, huh?
And we've also seen like Sydney and Australasia has performed, obviously not in Europe, but has performed really well. I think we just released a report, the research team at Knight Frank, of global super prime transactions over the last couple of months, and I think top in terms of the only market that had actually seen an increase in value over the last couple of months was Sydney. And I think that also benefits massively from the rise of Asia, which continues. Obviously, Asia has a very young population, a growing population. There's a lot of wealth being produced there, and I think they're looking at markets like Australia and Sydney as pretty close proximity, and they're putting a lot of money into them. So Sydney's quite obviously a little bit further afield, but quite an interesting market, I think.
And it's primarily the Asian money.
Yeah, and Asia actually we haven't really talked about, have we?
Yeah, so for San Francisco, in terms of foreign investment, it traditionally would be Asian. We don't have a lot of like Russian or Middle Eastern, money coming in here type of thing.
Yeah, I think there was a survey that was done recently that said that the US was the Asian market's favorite destination in terms of real estate investment. Yes. So I guess that carries forward to what you're saying.
Yeah, definitely. It's very much like Vancouver as well.
Yeah, and education.
But I think Vancouver's put in some restrictions.
Did they?
Yeah, they put some restrictions on foreign investment because I think the market was just overheating because of all the foreign money.
A lot of empty places.
Yeah, that might actually benefit San Francisco and US markets.
Definitely.
I think the education, certainly for a lot of the Asian investors we work with, sometimes, obviously it's the local real estate, but, the places where people buy and invest are very often dedicated by either where they're holidaying or where they're spending the time there for business, or also a lot for education. We see a huge amount of people coming, maybe just buying small flats for their kids in London, and then the parents coming over and saying, actually, we want something bigger. And I know that for the US and the UK, and also, funny enough, for places like Switzerland, the schools and the private schools are a huge drive for a lot of the Asians to then, it's one of their main reasons for them looking to come over, as well as investing in the real estate market, but specifically for why they're investing in those destinations. There's a lot going.
Where in Switzerland are you seeing that, like Stade and St. Moritz and
Geneva? I think as well is quite popular. Yeah,
interesting.
Yeah, Zurich is quite performing really well.
Yeah,
and there are. Obviously, we haven't really talked about places like Hong Kong with what's going on there, but there are other parts of Asia also. Like we've had the welcome stamp in Barbados, like what the Bahamas are going to do. In Singapore, they're wanting to attract a lot more of the hedge funds and the financial investment money and those companies to be based in Singapore and maybe to come from places like Hong Kong or other jurisdictions around the world that maybe have gone from being, being sort of, should we say, having a good reputation, financial reputations and standings, to dropping down off that sort of approved list. So people are saying, well, actually, I'm going to move my financial institution from, let's say it's in Panama, and move it to somewhere else, whether it's in Asia, whether it's in the Caribbean, whether it's Singapore. So, tax, which Alex mentioned, tax is a massive thing. And with what's going on with the amount of money and stimulus that's being pumped back into countries, whether it's the US, whether it's the UK or parts of Europe, fundamentally, those governments are going to have to find the money to pay it back somewhere, somehow. And there definitely is a sense for people, everybody is much more nimble, I think, today than they were a decade ago. Companies are a lot more nimble in terms of where they can base themselves, where they can locate themselves and their staff. So I think, there's a lot of forward planning going on at the moment. We talk to, and as Alex does, we talk to a lot of private offices, a lot of family offices, a lot of private bankers who are saying, well, we just need to plan ahead. The clients are asking us, where should they invest? Where can they get good value for money? And where can they basically buy for sensible prices?
Yeah.
And then hopefully, which is why, virtually all my clients, I stick them straight on to Alex, if they can get fantastic finance in all of those locations, then it just makes it all the more attractive. And then, as most people do, we don't need to advise the majority of our sort of ultra high net worth clients because they're so well versed in it. But I think a lot of people forget about the currency exchanges and the foreign currency exchanges across different parts of the world. If you're in Europe looking to invest in the US, then you should be talking to somebody to say, well, actually, we might be looking to buy in 2 years' time in the US, because one of the kids is going to go to college or whatever else it is. So actually, can we forward buy our currency? Speak to a broker to make sure, when we start to talk about 5, 10, 15, $20 million, all of a sudden, small points on the currency exchange rate make a massive difference in terms of the amount of money the transaction is going to cost. So there are a number of things that play into what's happening at the moment. But I just, I think we're all very fortunate to do the jobs we do. I feel very fortunate to do the job I do and to have the clients I have and to get to travel to the places I get to see some of the most expensive and rare real estate around the world, as you do, Justin. I think it's funny for those of us that don't know, I bumped into Justin in London. I bumped into Justin in Monaco. We're swimming in the same waters, albeit, our home
like
locations are in
guys.
different places. Yeah. Well, Alex, you've got a French wife, Alex. So you're spending a lot of time in the south of France and other areas.
I don't think I spent as much time there as you.
Are you seeing most people, Alex, financing then or all cash in the luxury market in London?
Yeah, I think generally speaking, you'd be surprised. People always say to me, why do your clients need to borrow? Because they're so wealthy and they can surely just buy these things in cash. And actually they can. I mean, when you see their assets and liability statements, they could easily buy these things in cash. But it's, as I said earlier, all about just managing their money and trying to optimize the transaction and the purchase as much as they can. So it usually makes sense, especially at the moment, as I said earlier, with low interest rates for people to borrow the money, especially with the tax implications. I guess the only time we start to see people looking at maybe at cash purchases is where speed is key. So, if they're looking to move very quickly, then sometimes people are buying things in cash and then maybe refinancing after the event. So taking capital out after they've bought them in cash. So there's some drawbacks to that because sometimes the tax doesn't work as well when they do that. But some people do that just purely for speed and efficiency. What we always recommend is that people speak to a tax lawyer or a tax advisor because especially with these massive transactions, it's really important that people structure them in the right way. That's a key consideration.
Yeah. And then, so moving on to when you have, obviously you're dealing with a property that's 20 million pounds or more, whether it's a private island or a place in London or Monaco or south of France. How do you, obviously it's a small target audience because it's, they have to be able to afford the place, but how do you, a private island, who do you target for that other than just looking at, everybody who can afford X number?
It's funny. It's funny you say that because that is pretty much exactly so for Little Pipe Key, which I mentioned earlier, which is on $85 million in these units. I sat down with a family. Funny enough, I met them in Dublin, in Ireland, to talk about an island in the Bahamas. But they said exactly the same thing. they said, look, this is our profile. This is who we are. This is why we bought it. An entrepreneurial type family who are very well traveled. And they basically said, yeah, so who is our buyer? And they knew very well, obviously they were testing me, but it's, the kind of person that buys, I think if you look at some of the most famous private island owners, right? You've got people like David Copperfield, you've got like Richard Branson, right? It's probably
Richard Branson is the iconic one.
Yeah, exactly. So owning Necker in the British Virgin Islands is probably the most one of the most well-known private island owners. And then you've got people like Johnny Depp and others. And I think, for a lot of these guys, I think for people who have very, very high profile lives, who want very, very low profile holidays, or who want to spend very low profile family time, there are fewer and fewer places around the world where you can do it. The original kind of private island type retreat resort was somewhere like Mustique, right? In St. Vincent and the Grenadines, 100 odd villas, Conlon Tenants, Princess Margaret, Mick Jagger, Tommy Hilfiger, all these, very, very, some pretty amazing and eclectic people who went to that area because either no paparazzi allowed, they own the airline, so they only let people in who are guests or homeowners. But the policy, it's like Mustique is like a sort of gentleman's club or a private members club that everybody's allowed into, and there's no membership process. But the rules, the unsaid rules is you don't take photos of each other and post them all over the internet. And even with social media today, people are using social media more and more on islands like that. But everyone's incredibly respectful of other people who are there. And I think that the private island itself is like the epitome of that. It's your own, it's your own domain. You're king of the hill. You're in charge of all you survey.
Yeah.
And buying private islands is not a straightforward process anyway. But that dynamic is that. I think it is that entrepreneurial type person. It's the person that can work from anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
My clients who own that island they've flown people onto that island for board meetings, but at the same time today they've got super fast Wi-Fi and other connections on that island. So, you can have your virtual board meeting on whatever, online casting service you want to use.
Like Elon
you can
Musk
do that, still run your company. Your kids can still educate themselves, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I think, it is kind of, I can totally see it's more the entrepreneurial type. They like the risk of owning it, the uncertainty. They have this island. They don't know, maintenance. I think, I think it would be great, Alex, I would love that little pipe K. Maybe you can do like 100% financing for me.
I'll see what I can do, Justin. I'm sure we can do something. You're a successful man.
Perfect. Done. Okay, I'll wrap it up a little bit here. What is your favorite for each of you?
Yeah.
What's your favorite? Because you guys deal with such a high grade of property on average. What is your favorite property you've ever been to? Where is it? What was the price point? And I would say second to that, which is, if you had your dream property anywhere as a second home, or where would that be? Doesn't have to be expensive, by the way, necessarily.
Hopefully not.
Yeah.
For me, I'd probably say, my wife's French, so I'd probably say a villa in France would be the perfect location, and that's a plan for the future.
Where in France?
Probably in the south of France, probably somewhere like Provence or something like that.
Nice.
And then in terms of the best property that I've been to, I think this is probably one that I went to with Edward, which was an amazing penthouse in Monaco a few years back with a ridiculous price tag, an incredible price tag. But that
250 million.
Yeah,
I read about that one.
Yeah. The view from this place was just insane. Sort of see the whole of the French Riviera and the whole of Monaco in front of you. So, yeah, not a little bit above my budget, but an amazing view.
And was that bought by a local or foreigner? Or?
It wasn't sold, but it is still.
Well,
it's a complicated situation.
Why don't we finance that for me as well?
Justin, you should have a look at it. We'll try and write you a check for that one.
And what about you,
Yeah,
Edward?
300 million, I reckon, to do it.
Yeah.
But they're. I mean, I'm super fortunate. I mean, I love going to some of the properties in France and in Italy, which are like walking into sort of 200-300-year-old museums, where in some cases the contents and the artwork and the furniture is worth exactly the same amount as the real estate. You've got nationally listed frescoes on the ceilings, and on the walls, etc. These incredible places that most people don't get to see, which is one of the things that I feel the most privileged in visiting a lot of these places with such incredible history. Alex mentioned the Torradian penthouse. That was, I think it was the most expensive real estate asset for sale in the world at one stage in time, asking for 100 million euros. I was very fortunate to have a relationship, and still do have a relationship, with the developers of that building. For me, in terms of my favorite place, my wife and I, my family, we love Sardinia. We love the Costa Smeralda, but actually all of Sardinia is beautiful. The beautiful clear water, even clearer now without quite so many super yachts, but fantastic Italian food. I think if I lived in Italy, I would be 3 times the size as I am now. But it's just, it's quite a nice chic place. And we don't really like crowds. So you go in, for me, even like places like Portofino, those places are lovely to go to in May when it's still warm. They're not quite so busy. So we go to Sardinia in the first week of September because the schools have all gone back. There are less people there. The sea is still beautifully warm. You don't need to queue for hours or to utilize all of your contacts to get a reservation at the best restaurants.
See, for me,
when it comes to,
I was just gonna say, south of France, I love the people watching. It's part of it.
Well, it is anywhere you go. It is anywhere you go, and it's in places like Monaco are amazing to do that. And then if you're in the 6th or the 7th in arrondissements in Paris, it's incredible. But then, there are these. It's what I love about travel, and what you love about travel, Justin, and why those who have the means to do travel to these places is places like Florence, places like Rome, through Italy. Going through the vineyards, whether you're in the Napa Valley or whether you're in, you're going through Provence. Provence in the summer is a spectacular place. And going to all the vineyards, and I'd probably drink more rosé than I should do, but I love Provençal rosé. So food and wine is a big thing for me. Actually, I have clients who travel according to what they want to drink and what they want to eat.
Yeah. Oh, well, I can see that.
If you can believe it, which I'm sure you can, right? Yeah.
Sure. Very cool. Well, thank you both for joining. You're both welcome.
Thanks so much,
to San Francisco
Pleasure.
anytime, and I'll show you around the Bay.
Would love that.
Yes, and I know it's nighttime for you right now, so hopefully you had dinner.
not yet, but Ed just made me very hungry with his description of European cuisine.
I know, I'm starving. Okay, oh wait, one quick question.
Well, Justin, thank you so much.
One quick question. Yeah. What's your favorite restaurant in London, Alex?
What's my favorite? That's a very hard one. Put me on the spot.
Not fancy, just a place you like going.
A place I like going. I often go to Il Barretto, which is actually just not too far from our office. So next time you're in London, Justin, you'll have to come and check it out with us.
Yeah.
But that's just an Italian restaurant. Again, I'm a big fan of Italian food. So yeah, that's one of my favorite spots.
Perfect. What about you, Edward?
I don't know if you've ever been to Hyde. There are 2 restaurants by Oli Debout. There's a Hyde above ground and a Hyde below ground. They're pretty amazing. Next time you're in London,
yes,
we should go.
Done. Sounds good. Okay, thank you so much, both.
And that's for you as well, Alex.
Yes, you're coming too.
I'll be there.
Thank you, Alex and Edward.
Thanks a lot, Justin.
Thanks so much, Justin.
Take
Pleasure.
care.
Speak
Take
soon.
care. Bye.
Take care.